Anybody ever watch Cash Cab? Cash Cab? You all have better things to do. But I was in the gym one day, and there was this game show on. These unsuspecting people were hailing a cab in New York City, and they get in, and all of a sudden all these lights go off, and it's like, they're on the Cash Cab. And the driver explains that he's going to take them wherever their fare has sent them, but along the way, he's going to ask them, as he's driving them en route, some trivia questions. And for every trivia question they get $100, and then they can call out on the street through the loudspeaker to some unsuspecting bystander for help, like a lifeline. That's all good fun. But it led me to thinking about Lamentations. And I would venture, if I said, listen, like with $100 on the line, I don't have it, but if I did, and I said, I give you 3 chances to just crack open a Bible and find the book of Lamentations, how do you think we would do? If I helped you out and said, it's one of the major prophets, you know those guys, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Daniel. Yeah, but Pastor, how come it doesn't have a name of a prophet if it's one of the major prophets? I'm glad you asked. So the book of Lamentations is attributed to the prophet Jeremiah. And Jeremiah, if you recall, maybe you don't, he's a young prophet when he's called. And God brings him into the scene in a moment when Israel is doing really well. Israel is very prosperous. Israel is, I misspoke. I should say Judah. I know we call it Israel, but it's really the southern kingdom. Israel has become no more. They've been conquered by the Assyrians. So 10 tribes conquered, 2 tribes to the south, Judah. So Judah is doing well. Jerusalem's the capital, and people are prospering. But Jeremiah says, over time, decades, he says, there are things about us as a people, things about our society that are not pleasing to God, that are carrying us away from our spirit with God, that are disconnecting us from each other. For example, he says, some of our leaders, some of our prophets, some of our church leaders are bought and paid for, and they are saying things on behalf of the king instead of on behalf of God. So they're not really speaking the truth. Some of our people are going to their neighbors who are fellow Jews, and they're taking their sons and daughters. When they owe them money, they're taking their sons and daughters to work as their servants or slaves to work off their debts, taking away their farms, being greedy and materialistic. They have 2 or 3 houses, and their brothers and sisters have none. Some of the wealthy, when they get arrested, are paying bribes to the judges and the lawyers. So they walk free, but people who are innocent are languishing in prison and have no one to defend them. There is violence on our streets, and the innocent are killed, and nobody seems to care. Now again, I'm talking about ancient Israel. 2,000 years ago. None of this stuff applies today. And I think about Lamentations. I think about Jeremiah's warnings. And he tells the people of Israel, listen, Babylon is coming. Judah sits between Babylon to the east and Egypt to the west. These 2 superpowers, they're on the road right in between. And they play this political game of kind of trying to be Switzerland between France and Germany. They play both sides, the kings of Judah. And eventually, though, one of the kings of Judah backs the wrong horse and he throws in with Egypt. Wrong play. The Babylonians attack, capture the king of Judah, take him and the royal family and 10,000 Jewish people from Jerusalem and from the surrounding countryside in the first part of the exile. You've heard of people who were taken. You say, well, that's happened 25 years ago. I don't know any of these people. Ezekiel, the priest, and also a book after him in the name. Daniel, the prophet, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the fiery furnace. All those guys taken. Years pass, other kings are paying tribute to Babylon, but they decide, the Babylonians got other problems, they're fighting other countries, so we're going to rebel again. We're not going to pay our tribute. Babylonians come back, and they said, that's it. One strike, it's on us. 2 strikes, it's on you. 3 strikes, you're done. And they go in, they take the temple of God, they burn it to the ground, they tear down the walls of Jerusalem, they slaughter the inhabitants of Jerusalem, they take their sons and daughters as slaves. Because the little ones are too hard to take, they just kill them. And it is this tragic physical defeat of war, but it's worse than that because it's the people of Judah have had their spiritual anchor cut. The promise of God was a king of David's line will sit on this throne forever, eternally. You remember that? But now we watch the king of Judah of David's line have his eyes taken out, his children killed before him, and taken in chains to Babylon. There is no king on the throne. This great impregnable city, Jerusalem, surrounded on all sides by a hill, by a mountain, there's no way it's going to be conquered, has fallen. And now we're a displaced people. And we don't know what to do. How did this happen? Where is God? Now, all that might sound in the rearview mirror like biblical history. But I bet if I said to you, for some of you in this room, where were you on November 22nd, 1963, you would know what I'm talking about. Yes? The day JFK was shot and killed. I bet you remember where you were. I bet you remember how you heard the news. And for those of you who are younger, September 11th, a plane is flown into the World Trade Tower 1. And as you're watching the news report or hearing coworkers or hearing a teacher at school tell you about this event, you're thinking, what is going on? We're under attack. And as you're watching and hearing the news film, another plane flies into another building. You're watching New Yorkers covered in debris, firefighters, people in a panic, jumpers. And you're thinking, what is going on? We are under attack, and these aren't combatants. This isn't an army of ours. These are men and women who are going to work and children. These are innocent people who are now dead. And somewhere in the world, somebody is praising this, celebrating this. Now you get a sense of what the people of Judah and the poem of Lamentations is about. Why? Why has this happened to us? Or better yet, because the book of Lamentations, unlike a lot of books in the Bible, but like the book of Numbers, in its Hebrew form has a different name than we give it in English, in our English Bibles. We call it Lamentations. But in Hebrew, the title of the book is a question. The word ekah means how. That's the title of the book. How? How did this happen? How did the chosen people of God now find ourselves with the very fabric of our community? Everything that is happy, everything that we remember that once was, now just ripped from us. How do we go on? And when I thought about this day, and I thought, geez, it's Visitor Sunday, and Robin says, can't we pick something a little cheerier? Visitors, welcome. I don't always preach on heavy text, but as I think about this, I'm thinking, listen, the Bible isn't some, infomercial self-help book. Read this book and your life will be great. It has some words of encouragement, yes, some songs and words that speak to that, but it also is a book that talks about the messiness of our relationships with one another, the beauty of our relationship with God, and sometimes the strain therein, the questions of life, the what, when, where, how, why. Where is God when things are painful? When human beings don't get it right, when we hurt each other, when we're brutal to each other, when we crush each other's spirits, when we share tragedy. And these poems from Lamentations meet us in that space. And it got me to thinking, conversations my grandfather used to have when we'd sit down, I'd be at his house and we'd be in the hammock or something. He'd say, when I was a kid, I was driving at 9 years old. And we didn't have any license or anything like that, and I would drive through, and I drove through this plain glass window, but and I thought, oh gosh. And then, he's talking to me about how he used to go to the candy store and he'd pay like a nickel and he'd get a whole bag of candy. I don't think it was a nickel. I think it was 2 cents. He'd get this big bag of candy, describe all the candy. He said, you can never find that today. Not nowadays. And this nostalgia about times gone by that were better. My dad, just the other day, we were talking about amusement parks because Elise and I had gone to an amusement park, and he was saying, my friend and I, when we were in grade school, we used to get on the streetcar. Nobody thought anything of it at the time. We'd go downtown Cleveland. We'd go to the amusement park. For a nickel, you could ride all the rides all day. The lines weren't really long. I bet the lines were pretty long, but, selective memory. And we just have a ball, and nobody worried about where we were or what was going to happen to us. You couldn't do that today. And I got to thinking, well, I don't know. My kids go out in the neighborhood and do things. But it's that nostalgia of what was and the fear and worry of this present time, what is, the things that keep us up at night, the things that keep us worried, the parallels of struggle from what Judah was going through, corruption in their leaders, corruption in their priests and prophets, violence in their streets, cruelty to one another, greed, corporate and individual greed that was taking people away from God and away from compassion and mercy. Any of this ringing any bells? And that's why we preach Lamentations. Because the same kind of stuff that's a struggle for them is a struggle for us, trying to sort it out in the world that doesn't always align with the views of God, the things that Jesus teaches us to be. And so in those moments, the prophet begins to talk about, through all this devastation and pain, all the things that the people are suffering. He says, where are you, God? And here is where he lands. He says, despite the things we're facing in this present moment, despite everything that's befallen to my people, as I watch them young and old, groan and struggle in exile, and those who are impoverished who've been left behind because they've always been left behind. They've always been seen as invisible. He said, Israel, chapter 3, great is the steadfast faithfulness of God. God will not disappoint. Great is your faithfulness. We get a song by its name unto us. Now we might struggle with Jeremiah a little bit because Jeremiah says that all this has befallen Israel because of the sins of Judah's people. And this is one of those kind of theodicy questions. Why does evil happen? Why do terrible things happen? Tragic strikes. And Jeremiah's understanding is that Israel, Judah, has fallen, the temple has fallen, because the people have lost sight of God. That maybe have some truth to it, maybe not. Maybe the Babylonians just wanted another jewel for their crown. But either way, as he's trying to make sense through his faith, through the lens of faith, about how these things have happened, just like you and I try to make faith a sense of things that sometimes don't make any sense. There is no sense when a child is buried by their family after years of struggle, unable to overcome addictions. There's no simple answer. Well, this is... What we have is hope. What we have is a God who says, no matter what you face or go through, whether it's hell on earth, I'm with you. I will not abandon you in this life or the next. I'm a God of life and not death. I'm a God of love, not hatred. I'm a God of mercy, not retribution and pain. I'm a God of deliverance. And so I leave you and myself with this. I can't always answer why terrible things happen in the world. Some of it's we cause, some of it's natural, some of it seems just tragic and without explanation. But what I can say is that all of us, without exception, face some of these harsh realities in life. All of us. And what I can say in the midst of those things is that every time I look at Scripture, where is God in those painful moments? I mentioned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're thrown into the fiery furnace for defying the king Nebuchadnezzar. And where is God? Just standing out watching the barbecue? No. God is in the flames with those three men. The disciples are in the midst of their boat being swamped in the storm, in danger of being capsized, and they cry out to Jesus, "We are going to die out here." And where is Jesus? Walking towards them through the storm, into their boat, calming the seas. It's a God who enters pain, enters tragedy. It's a shepherd who I said a couple of weeks ago, doesn't spend time whittling away at watching the 99 sheep, but spends the energy to find those who are hurting, broken, lost. A God who is always pursuing, always caring, always seeking to restore what is broken or lost. Andy Cohen, his poem, The Light Gets In, talks about some of the great darkness we experience in the world and says, but if there's just even a little crack where the light can enter in, then there's hope. And that hope shines in the darkness. We say it in the church a little bit differently. The light has come into the world, and the darkness has never overcome it. And the hope of Christ, in the midst of whatever we carry in here today, whatever heaviness or joy, whatever worries or anxieties, the anchor, the rock beneath our feet, it says, you never face this alone. Not ever. You have this great God who calls you by name and knows you from the hairs of your head to the toes of your feet and says, the most common phrase in all the Bible, don't be afraid. Amen.